are we going to do about Claudius?
Quintilius Varus, where are my eagles?
Don't touch the figs. There'll be no pain, I promise. What a pretty thing, a fire is. Don't go in there.
To me, I was told it was a classic serial. Classic serial, BBC was doing, I think, 3 or 6 a year. It was part of its remit. Martin Lismore, the producer, when he offered me Claudius, I was delighted because I loved working with him. And we, first of all, had to decide who was going to write the series. And we decided after some consultation in which a number of writers featured that we would go for Jack Pullman, whom I also knew because I'd worked with him in the past, and I knew him to be a wonderful comic writer. I was very, very lucky in the actors that I managed to get to play the major roles.
I thought for Augustus Caesar would be, Paul Schofield or Alec Guinness. And so I met Herbie, and I sent this big script. I thought it was probably Tiberius. That's probably in my range. Tiberius. And he said, No. So I wanted to play Augustus Caesar.
I wanted an authoritative person and slightly ludicrous because he was written pompously. And I was looking for an actor who could actually do this. And to me, he did it. Brian did it marvelously.
He said, first and foremost, my main note for you is this, Brian. Just be as you are, full of flannel. He said, but do not act being an emperor. You must not act being an emperor at all. I want you just to be an ordinary guy. Everybody else is going to make you an emperor.
When we began to do this series, we were all very, very shaky because we didn't know how to approach it. Our director knew how to approach it, but of course, we all had our own ideas about how we wanted to play our parts.
What I wanted from Sian was, first of all, she was very beautiful, and that was a major consideration in the way I saw the part. But allied to this beauty was this terrible, this evil, evil woman. So you had the contrast of this. And I love, anyway, the contrast of comedy and horror, which is, of course, goes right through Claudius, because the one bolsters the other. Now, here we have beauty against evil. And it was the concept of the evil that Sian found very difficult at first, because she was trying to justify it in sort of modern psychological terms.
In 2 weeks of rehearsal, we were dreadful. Sian was all right. Derek was all right. George, I was the worst. We just couldn't do it. There's no reality. And they got Jack Pullman in. And Jack Pullman says, I know exactly what you're going through. He said, I couldn't write it until I thought of the mafia.
Herbie said, listen, we are in a tremendous hurry here. I know how this should be done. I'm going to tell you how it should be done. And we just don't have time for negotiation. So for the first week or so, we were all floundering about and not being very happy. And suddenly, I played one scene in what we called the family drawing room, that room the family used to sit in. And for the first time, Jack and Herbert looked pleased at the end of the scene. And suddenly I asked them, I said, is this a Jewish family comedy? And one of them, I can't remember which one, sort of nodded and said, yes, we didn't want to say anything like that to you, but that's quite a good thing to think of.
I was as much at sea as everybody else in trying to find the right style. Both Jack and I had an idea what we wanted, but to actually implement this and getting actors to persuade actors to do this. Until eventually, when I found that Sian was floundering in trying to find the style, I was able to say to her, look, relish the evilness. Don't justify it. Just be evil.
I realised that one of the main characteristics of the character was patience and vigilance and, as you say, a hawkishness. And that was something that emerged in the first few weeks, and Herbie pointed it out to me and said that was something I really needed to hang on to because it was very, very characteristic of Livia.
The more evil you are, the funnier it is, and the more terrifying it is, because it's allied to this wonderful way that you look and the ease and the softness in which you deliver it all. And she hooked onto that, and once she got that, she was unstoppable.
Mother, I'm a happily married man. Julia doesn't interest me. She wouldn't interest me if you hung her naked from the ceiling above my bed.
She might even do that if I asked her.
Aren't you forgetting something? She's still married to Marcellus, and Marcellus is not dead yet.
When I start to forget things, you may light my funeral pyre and put me on it, dead or alive.
We had an advisor on the series called Robert Erskine, who was wonderfully, wonderfully helpful.
Graves, in his books, has covered the period when Augustus's supreme power, originally only intended as temporary, was hardening into an hereditary dynasty of emperors, both good and bad, but mainly bad.
And I shamelessly used him and turned to him whenever I was in any doubt, particularly on the detail that was required in the way people behaved, dressed, wore jewellery, etc.
On the first day of rehearsal, Robert Erskine was there to answer any questions about the Roman period, and he mentioned the fact about servants, because someone brought it up, and he likened the servants in Roman times to present-time machines.
How should they behave towards their slaves? Severely, do you think? With familiarity? Actually, I should think neither. I suspect they take no notice of them at all because they were simply chattels to be bought and sold at will, like a dishwasher or a hat stand.
Someone like Nero would probably have 250 servants who would do individual things, like there'd be a slipper servant who would, or your shoe servant. Then there'd be an underwear servant, and then there'd be an outerwear servant, and there'd be someone who did your hair. And then there'd be someone who would put the flowers in your hair. And then there would be someone who would feed you and someone who would prepare your food. I mean, it just went on and on and on. Everything now that we take for granted, there was someone there to do it for you.
You didn't say please or thank you to a slave. You just held out your cup and it's filled.
I found it terribly difficult at first to be so incredibly rude, really, to the servants. You know, we tend to say thank you, or we at least look at people when they do things for us and nod.
Oh! Let's get Agrippa back to Rome. He's the only one who speaks their language, if we can call it that.
In a rage and kicking trays out of the way, and there were slaves and servants all over the place, and Hervé was very exasperated, and he was saying, "No, Jean, no, beastly to the servants, be beastly to the servants."
Erskine was deeply involved all the time. And I'm not giving him credit. I mean, he was outstanding and brilliant. I mean, I was a handful for him because I learned from him, I understood the rules, and then slightly abused them.
I don't know whether people know that, for example, in those days there was no such thing as lavatory paper. So you ate with your, I can't remember if I've got this right, you ate with your right hand because your left hand was used for what lavatory paper would be used for now.
He would get very upset, at times, if I used the wrong hand for eating my food. The one hand is for wiping your arse, and one hand, is for eating food, and I'd use both. And I'd say, well, I'm Caesar, I'll do what the bloody hell I like.
Now, that's a very Roman reaction, it really is.
I referred to him all the time. I deeply respected him, and he helped me enormously with Augustus Caesar. He helped us all. I mean, terrific guy, terrific man. And Derby Wise absolutely swore by him, the director. Listen to him, he knows what he's talking about. And he did. It's just that now and again I had to make certain things my soil. And I was right to.
I'd worked with Derek before on a series called Man of Straw with Martin Lismore, the same producer. And at that time, he had just left the National Theatre and was looking for, his agent was looking for something else, and phoned Martin Lismore, and we were actually in some distress about casting that part because the actor that we originally thought was really not, we didn't think was good enough. And we cast him immediately, and he was brilliant.
I remember the phone ringing this particular time. I was about to play, we're talking 1976 now, and I was about to play Hamlet for the first time. And my agent rang up and said, they're thinking of you for Claudius. And I thought Claudius and Hamlet. And I said, I don't want to play Claudius. I thought I was going to play Hamlet. No, they said, you silly fool. It's Claudius and I, Claudius.
I mean, we were considering a lot of other actors as well, obviously, in the nature of things. Also, we had to satisfy other people, like London Films, etc.
I was way, way, way down the list before they got to me. Lots of other actors had been thought of. As I said, Charlton Heston, Ronnie Barker was another one, to play the older Claudius. And I think I came into the frame when, at the point, they decided to have one actor playing the young and the old. I was then taken out to supper by the producer, the director, to meet the representative of London Films. And I had to charm him and persuade him that this nonentity he was having dinner with could actually play the role of Claudius. That was the best part of my performance in playing Claudius, that supper party. Anyway, next day they said, OK, we're gonna take a chance and we'll go with Derek.
Derek and I work very, very well together because I like to think that I'm able to get out of Derek what most other directors can't get out of him. And he responded wonderfully to the way that I like to work.
Well, Claudius was the arch survivor.
He looked an idiot and was actually more brilliant and more intelligent than all the other characters put together.
A man who faces life with a great deal of disability, to start with, placed in a family and a world which increased those disabilities. It was a highly dangerous world in which he existed.
Do you think it's safe that Uncle Claudius should be told my secret? Or are you going to poison him?
Oh, he's quite safe. And remember this, monster. Your Uncle Claudius here is a phenomenon. He's so old-fashioned that because he's sworn to protect his brother's children, he will never harm you.
He managed to escape all the ramifications and manipulations of Livia, and would flatter her when necessary, would duck and dive when he had to deal with Caligula. All those very, very dangerous things. A real politician.
Is it true you've written a book about the religious changes during the reign of Augustus?
Yes, Mother.
And that you intend to give a public reading of it?
Yes, Mother.
You'll do no such thing?
Oh, Mother. It wasn't my idea. Americus suggested it before he left.
I won't have you making a laughing stock of my family.
I'm better when I'm rehearsed.
He's a trained monkey, but he still looks and sounds every inch a monkey.
Come.
He is clever enough to use his disabilities rather than they use him. And through that use, manages to survive.
Derek is, to me, one of these magical actors. Again, I owe him an immense debt of gratitude for this performance.
Claudius, do you bear me any ill will?
Ill will? Why should I?
Oh, it's funny the way we can be so wrong about people. I was wrong about you. You see, we judge too much on appearances. And, well, I mean, your appearance is against you. I mean, you know that, don't you? I mean, you give everybody the impression that you're a bit of a fool. No point in mincing matters. But you're not such a fool, are you?
I hope not.
There is a difference between a stutter and a stammer, which I, at that time, wasn't aware of, that a stutter is actually what it sounds like. Stutter is an onomatopoeic word. It's like a machine gun, which stutters. And it is a repeat of the, you know, if you say please, you please. But a stammer, an implosive stammer like Claudius had, is a much more difficult thing in that you cannot get a word out. You don't repeat, but you can't. And sometimes the mouth will form, and you look as if you're going to say butter, and you're really trying to say mother. So it's very difficult to help a stammerer because, you know, you don't know really what they're trying to get out.
Livy called you Claudius.
I'm Iberius Claudius Usus Manicus.
Oh, that Claudius. They told me you're a half-wit.
Well, my am is ashamed of me because I stammer.
The art director on I, Claudius, Tim Harvey, had an assistant who had such a stammer, and I used to pin him against the wall and get him to talk to me, and then I'd copy it. The limp for the first few episodes, I suppose, was a stone, the old stone in the shoe, so I could remember which foot I was limping with. But I got rid of that after a while. Just as the BBC, when I got the first scripts, the stammer or stutter was written in. So if the word please was written in the script, it was written with 6 P's. And after a time, they saved on typewriter ribbon and let me get on with it myself. The twitch was something that I didn't need help with. The stammer did stay with me a little bit. Yes, it did. It did, because the whole series took 6 months. It was 13 episodes, 2 weeks an episode, 26 weeks. Stammering all the time. Yes, it did stay around for a little while afterwards. It did, yes. I have since then played 2 other stammering parts on stage, and word got around, I think, that apparently to an old lady once in the interval said it was so lovely to see that there was another part that could accommodate my disability.
The scene that I adored doing was the scene where I discovered that my daughter has been sleeping around with lots of senators.
He lined up all his various lords and assistants, and I followed him along with the camera. And he says, "Did you sleep with my daughter?" And I said, yes, I have to admit it. And he went all the way along till in the end, he never asked anything, they just nodded.
Have you slept with my daughter?
Caesar, I...
Answer the question.
Yes, Caesar.
It's a terrifying scene because there you do see the power of Caesar. That all these senators, some of them his best friends, have slept with his daughter, had orgies and all kinds of things. I mean, she slept with hundreds. That's what it implies. She'd been sleeping with hundreds of men.
Not slept, Caesar.
Not slept? You mean it happened standing up, perhaps? Or in the street, or on a bench? Not slept?
Now, there were about 10 or 11 actors amongst them that we rehearsed. And then on the day we did it, they introduced about 7 or 8 extras. And they'd not seen the scene. And we did this first take. And I have a sneaky feeling that's not the tape you see. That's not the take you see. I have a sneaky feeling that is the best take. Because I went amongst them, and as I was saying, have you slept, have you? No, oh, standing up, sitting down. Oh, very good. No, so. And they started to giggle as I went down the line. They all, different ones, started to giggle. And they knew they shouldn't giggle, that they would bollocks it up if they giggled. They'd get told off by the director. But they couldn't, they were finding it so funny. I did it again in the second take, which of course is wonderful. It's a wonderful take, and it's beautifully filmed, using the tram lines and the cameras pulling back, wardrobe, makeup, everybody in unison. And it's wonderful scene. And I suddenly end it by saying, "Is there anyone in room who has not slept with my daughter? Take them away!" I mean, they're going to be vaporized. They're going to be vaporized. Take them out! I'll decide what to do with them later!
No, I'm all right.
Then you see the power of Augustus. Then suddenly when Herbie says, "Now you can turn it on. Now you can turn it on, Brian."
You banish her. Banish her for life. Don't tell me where she's gone. Don't ever mention her name. But let her be all alone until she dies.
She's not fit for human company!
George, playing Tiberius, had in many ways the most difficult task. He had the least spectacular part, you know, if you think in terms of what Caligula gets up to.
I was playing at Stratford at the time, and these scripts arrived, and I couldn't believe my eyes. And not unnaturally, I accepted.
George was, I think, in his early 40s at the time, but he had to go from the age of about 24, I can't remember now, to about 80-something in the story.
I was then 42, and I went on a very, very serious diet. No drink, no bread, no potatoes, nothing. And I had a spaniel in those days, and every morning I would get up about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and run round Hyde Park, which is 6 miles, right round the park and back home. Then I'd get on a bicycle and cycle to the North Kensington Baths and swim 12 lengths, and then arrive at rehearsals. But I got not only got the weight off, but put the muscle back on, and I was exactly the same weight as I was when I was 24.
I must leave Rome.
You'll stay. You'll have patience, as I have.
Where has your patience got you?
He was destined by his mother's force to become emperor. But he was not emperor material, nor did he want to be.
His mother was determined to make him emperor, and he had to follow the machinations of his mother in order to get him there.
Tiberius actually thinks that if he doesn't become emperor, then the whole of his life will have been wasted.
He's altered his will. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue. That took your breath away, didn't it?
He is a very weak man because he actually desperately wants people to like him. He wants his mother to love him.
I must have been nodding when I gave birth to you.
He wants the respect from Augustus, and he doesn't have it.
I'm sick of it. The gods know I've done my best. He never liked me. Never. 30 years I've run his errands for him. I've fought on his bloody frontiers, collected his taxes. He's never once put his hand on my arm and said, thank you. What would I have done without you? Now he sends me off to Illyricum and he doesn't even plan a farewell dinner. Not even a goodbye. Just get on your horse and ride. Well, damn him! I retired before and I can retire again. Let his precious grandson run his empire for him. I'm sick to death of it.
But he doesn't say, I want out, because you are a wicked old woman. He says he wants out because nobody likes him.
I had terrible trouble, really. I keep my face straight with George Baker all the time, because he did that po face he had all the time, you know. And I had terrible trouble keeping my face straight with him. I had lots of scenes.
Mark Antony was twice the man you are. And when he spat on my sister, he learned a lesson that he didn't live long enough to profit from. Do you understand me?
But a wonderful moment I had with George, and I'm telling George off. You know, I don't want you seeing your wife. Right at the end of the scene, when I've been bollocking him for about 10 pages, and I'm easing down a bit now. And I said, and he's not. I'm not going to have him killed or anything, you know. And I suddenly said to him, I don't want you seeing your wife. I don't like it. Just a little. And I could feel him contort his old stomach, so he didn't laugh, because I just did that little thing to him.
But it's sorry. I don't like it. Do you understand? It's not right. Now, you play fair with me, and you'll see. I can be generous, too. Good.
And it's a lovely moment, isn't it? Don't sulk!
You play fair with me, eh?
Don't sulk! He can't stand him sulking all the time, but always on the edge of corpsing, laughing.
You wrote a letter. In my name and yours. Without even using the seal.
You were away. And anyway, you don't let me use the seal.
Who's emperor here? You or I?
I remember the triumph that he felt. At last, but he's nearly in his 70s, you know, and at last he's able to say to Olivia, you're a stinking old rotten human being and you've ruined my life.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. It's your letter. You stick to it. And if it's read in the House, I'll deny all knowledge of it and excuse you on the grounds of mental incompetence brought on by extreme old age.
I think the whole point of I, Claudius, and I think why it's lasted so well, is because there is a tremendous amount of humour. There's an enormous amount of humour in the Graves book, and Jack Pullman has kept it there. And the triumphant humour in the anger of being able to score off his mother at last is wonderful. So long as you play it with that joy, you know. Christ, have you ever left yourself open for the first time in your life? I can really bang in there. I'm going to love it. Well, I remember enjoyed playing it very much indeed. I remember something very, very silly. We had to do a retake because when I did one of the flips, the Marks and Spencer brand showed very, very high on the underpants, but not quite Romanesque. So we had to do that one again.
I'll tell you something, Drusus. Sometimes I so hate myself. I can't bear the thought of me anymore.
I think it was one of the key scenes when Tiberius really begins to know that he can't ever fight his mother and that she is wicked and he loves his brother and he hates what's happened to him. And I think he says to his brother that he's the only person that can lead him through, and who knows that Drusus was the only person who knew his dark nature.
You don't know anything about darkness, do you? Inside darkness. Blackness.
Ah, stop bragging. I could match you black for black.
Not you. Not you. They say the tree of the Claudians produces two kinds of apples, the sweet and the sour. It was never more true than you and me.
And what of our mother? Which is she?
Olivia? They say a snake bit her once and died.
Hey, that's no longer funny.
I've only cared for 3 people in my life. One was our father.
Yes, he was the noblest of us all.
Yes. The other was Vipsania.
I was sorry about that. Why? Why did you divorce her?
Livia insisted on it. Julia wanted it. Augustus insisted on it.
It's all the same. You were so happy, you might have refused.
Do you think the monarchy will survive Augustus?
No, I don't. Rome will be a republic again, I promise you that.
Then perhaps I did it all for nothing.
Tiberius was very worried that dark nature was now coming through. And Herbie gave us all the space in the world. We did the whole fight and the whole scene in one. And it was... Part of that was the lovely thing about working in a studio, because we did have these long, long scenes. They were almost like theatre.
Caligula is one of the most bizarre, flamboyant and cruel characters in the whole piece. And its realization by John Hurt was nothing short of miraculous and inspired.
Just been talking to that river god. He threatened to drown me.
Does he know who you are?
Oh, he does now. I've just given him a severe reprimand. He'll soon shut up.
I have to say that when I first read it, I thought, I don't believe that the known world could possibly be led by a lunatic of this nature. I think it must have been something to do, actually, with the whole Puritan upbringing that I had that would not allow my mind to think that this was a possibility. And I passed on it, basically. But Herbie Wise did, who directed it wonderfully, the wonderful Herbie Wise, who actually was the first director I ever worked with in 1961, I think it was. And he decided, because of the fragmented nature of the piece and because people weren't going to meet each other, rather than have a party at the end of the whole series, he decided to have a party at the beginning of it. And he invited me. And the atmosphere was so electric, and I can't tell you, it was quite extraordinary, that I went up to Herbie in the middle and said, would it ever be possible if I could change my mind? And he said, I hoped that's what you might say.
Your emperor is amongst you once again. All his wars successfully concluded and the victorious armies brought back to Rome.
He made me gasp with astonishment and in awe of what he did. There was one scene, he had a long speech, and when he'd done it, all the extras in the studio applauded him, not as characters, but as performers.
What did he find? This conqueror of the Germans, this victor over the mighty Neptune. The streets empty of crowds and flowers, no triumphs awarded, no games, no celebrations, but 3 miserable old ex-consuls waiting at the gates to greet him, and a room full of cowardly stay-at-home senators who spend all their time in the theater and at the baths, while he has spent 6 months living no better than a private soldier.
There's a scene I was doing with Livia, which I had to say goodbye, as it were, to the wretched old hag.
I hear you're dying, great-grandmother.
And I suggested that I got into bed with her. And Herbie was not at all sure about this, because this was at a time when it was almost not allowed to get into bed with your own wife. You know, you could sit on the bed or sit by the bed, but you couldn't be in bed. I think it was just post that, but it was still, you had to be very careful on television.
He said to me in rehearsal, I want to get into bed with her, you know. And I thought, I was at first resisting it. I thought, I don't think it's... He said, well, please, please, please let me try it. So we tried it in the rehearsal.
You won't forget your promise, will you?
To make you a goddess. And what makes you think that a filthy, smelly old woman like you could become a goddess?
Anyway, we did it, and I think it was very successful, I think.
Let me tell you something. Thrasylus has made another prophecy. Told Tiberius. He said, one who is going to die soon will become the greatest god the world has ever known. No temple to be dedicated to anyone but him in the whole Roman world. Not even to Augustus. Do you know who that one is? Me. Me. I shall become the greatest god of all. And I shall look down on you, suffering all the torments of hell, and I shall say, leave her there. Leave her there forever and ever and ever. Goodbye, great-grandmother.
That scene was another example of the way you're able to quickly achieve something relatively complex and unusual, maybe, if you know the other person very well. John and I had been friends for years and years, so we knew each other terribly well.
That wonderful Sundance that he does.
I did the makeup of that myself, because I said it's got to be, you know, the BBC makeup girls were wonderful, I have to say, but they were being just that little bit too tasteful. And I said, no, this has got to be absolutely outrageous. It's got to hit you immediately. It's image on screen time, you know? This is film, not literature. And so I really got the gold out and things, and it's totally outrageous makeup.
And then she flits across the sky from star to star about. She lightens darkness where she flies and blows night candles out.
Watching Derek trying to deal with this as Claudius and trying to be diplomatic and know which way to go, because he had no idea which way Caligula could turn. Was he to like it? Was he to say this is ridiculous? Was he to say this is a little over the top? But as always, Claudius chose to virtually worship him, so therefore got away with it. But watching that going on was hysterical too.
Oh, God of gods! Never have I witnessed a dance that gave me such profound spiritual joy.
On the cruelty side was, of course, the thing where he disembowels his half-sister.
He's so worried that the child of Zeus might turn out to be greater than Zeus. And being as he is Zeus, certainly in his mind, he always favored the Greeks rather than the Romans, the Roman gods, so he always used Zeus. In his deeply distorted mind, he couldn't allow that to happen.
Who am I?
Zeus, Lord of Heaven, my husband.
Who are you?
The Queen of Heaven, your wife.
Do you trust me?
Oh, utterly, my lover, my lord.
There'll be no pain, I promise.
Pain? Why, what do you want to do, my angel? You know I can resist you nothing.
When you consider now what you can get away with, I mean, the way I shot all this was shot from behind. She was kind of strung up in a bed. She was naked, but I shot it all from behind, so you didn't actually see what was happening.
Lord and master wants.
I must draw the child from the Queen of Heaven's womb and swallow it whole, so that a new child may grow out of the head of Zeus.
Yes, darling. Draw it out. Let Zeus take the child and... Oh. Then let's go to bed. Our queen's very sleepy. What's that? What you going to do?
There'll be no pain, I know it.
Pain? But why should... Caligula?
We are immortal gods.
The makeup girls were so busy doing the makeup on her belly that there was nobody to look after John. So I put the blood on John's mouth and did John's makeup, ready for him to open the door and for me to see him.
You saw some blood on the face of Caligula, and then when Claudius opens the door, I never actually showed what he saw, because the suggestion of what he saw was more powerful than the thing itself. But I'm afraid it got, again, I use the word butchered, by people who ought to have known better, and the scene now is somewhat attenuated, and it is a great regret because I haven't got the original.
Don't go in there. Don't go in there.
There were concerns about it, concerns about whether it would be too powerful or too strong. It was shown in England, but it was not shown in America. The scene where he comes out of the room covered with his false beard, which he'd put on to be like Zeus for the whole ritual, because he made it into a ritual.
May I inquire, what is the character of this glorious change which has come over you?
Isn't it obvious?
You've become a god! Oh, my God. Oh, let me worship you. Oh, how could I have been so blind?
Well, I am still in mortal disguise. That wouldn't help you. The whole concept of immediately, of course, is again grotesque at the same time extremely funny. Suddenly this man is in front of him who's discovered that he's a god. I always knew that this would happen. I always knew that I was divine. Oh, think of it. When I was 2, I put down a mutiny in my father's army and so saved Rome. Well, that was prodigious.
It's like the stories they tell of Hercules as a child, or Hercules who angled snakes in his cradle.
Exactly. Only Mercury only stole a few oxen, whereas by the age of 10, I'd already killed my father. Oh, you didn't know that, did you?
No. Divinity.
Well, even Jove didn't do that. He merely banished the old man.
Why, if you don't mind my asking, did you do that?
Well, he stood in my way. Me, a young god, he tried to discipline me. So I frightened him to death in Antioch.
So it was you who did all that? That's incredible.
Oh, no, not at all. Not for a god, it was very simple. At the same time as being extremely funny, and as a concept, it's extremely dangerous too. And it's a very interesting thing to be able to play with that. That scene was important. It was a huge one. They just pounced on him and knifed him to death.
The watchword, butcher, is liberty. No, you can't have a god, have a god, you can't kill the god!
The good taste of the BBC was putting all sorts of funny little plastic bands down my thing so that if I would squeeze it or something like that and a dribble of blood would come out. And so I said, no, I don't think this has got to really happen all at once. So I got them to put a whole pouch of blood here and play the scene quite carefully because I had quite a loose chemise thing on top, you know. And, or was it a toga I was wearing then? And it had to come through that, you see, so it needed a lot of blood. And so that when I did actually go to hold my guts, as it were, all the blood came out and came through the white and so on, which gave it an immediate impact. And I think we were proved right there, because I think it needed that. Strong stuff.
There is a very nasty side to me, actually, I think, and all of that comes out in Nero. I mean, he was a spoilt child, got everything that he ever wanted, and including eventually to become emperor, and he just misused everything that he was given. I mean, you know, if he wanted something, I mean, you know, in primary, one of the big things in the particular episode was that I couldn't have a girl that I wanted. And so my mother gives herself to me. I mean, you know, that is the ultimate sacrifice of any mother, surely. You know, her little boy is sexually aroused and doesn't want the girl, or the girl doesn't want him, so she gives herself.
My poor baby. It's not fair, is it? Lock you out of your room. And you, the Emperor-elect. Then, she's only your wife. She doesn't feel for you as a mother would. A mother knows how her baby feels. Yes. She wouldn't let him be unhappy. No. No. Never. Never. Oh. Oh, I'm so sleepy.
When I realized that I was going to play the part, I then went, in fact, to Greece on a holiday, and I took the books with me and read them. on a Greek island. So I was able to soak up all the atmosphere that I could possibly want to soak up, and eventually when we filmed it, it sort of helped. It was great.
I'm sorry to have been the cause of that.
It's not your fault. Everyone could see that.
Nevertheless, I'll go and see him. Come, Octavia. Let's go and find your brother. Perhaps we can pacify him.
I think you're very kind.
There's far too little kindness in the world.
I was dressed head to toe in raw silk. I mean, incredible amounts of it, because, you know, he's a big character, and it was just wonderful. And the wardrobe people really went into everything. I mean, we had these undergarments, and we had the top, and we had then sways of material going round us. And they used my own hair, which they curled every day in the studio, which took hours because they had these special curling tongs. And then I had fresh flowers put into my hair every day. And, they had to obviously match them up with the previous day's filming. During this episode, we had a producer's run. So we not only had that, but they did a dream sequence where they had all the stars of the series who were now, by this time, dead. People like Sian Phillips and John Hurt and Brian Blessed and Maggie Tyzack and George Baker, and they all came back to this dream sequence. And so they came to the producer's run and sat in a line. And they were, before we started the run, they were, laughing, and they were high as kites because, the series was now a big success. And they sat there in a line, these 5, 6 really big actors. And I said to Barbara Young, I can't believe this. This is the most terrifying thing. So we gripped ourselves and we did the run, and thankfully, the run was wonderful. But every time we finished a scene, I glanced over to look at these 6, 7 actors, thinking any minute now they'll put their hands up with 4.6 or 5.7 like ice skaters marking the scene. And thankfully they didn't, but they were very complimentary at the end of it.
I remember when we did, I think, one of the first scenes, we had to be very, very young. I don't think Herbie knows this, but he had us in a massage scene lying on our fronts. And I thought to myself, now, both of us, myself and the other girl, were just a fraction too old for the very young bit. So I said, if we lie on our backs, everything will fall back and we'll look much better.
To tell you the truth, it's often crossed my mind that Livia might have had a hand in that. Julia? Well, I might be wrong. But he was a strong, healthy man, and he never had a serious illness until she got her hands on him.
A particular example of the strength of Antonia is in the scene where she's decided that her daughter's behaviour is so abhorrent that she literally walls her up, locks her in, walls her up, and leaves her in a room to die.
Mother! Let me out! Let me out! Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!
What are you doing? What are you going to do with her?
But she sits outside the room and hears the cries of the girl inside. Claudius comes along and said, Mother, Mother, you've got to let her out. And I said, no, I won't let her out, because that's her punishment. And then Claudius says to me, how can you bear it, Mother? And she replies, and that's mine. My punishment.
Heaven's sake, let her out! How long are you going to leave her in there?
Until she dies.
Dies? Have you gone mad? She's your daughter. How can you leave her to die?
That's her punishment.
How can you bear to sit out here and listen to her?
And that's mine. Leave me, Claudius. I shan't move from here until they open that door and find her dead. Leave me.
Oh, no.
I remember the last scene that I had with Claudius where she says she's going to kill herself. But we have to remember that she lived in a time when no one had said that this was a sin in any way.
I'm going to join your father.
What do you mean?
I'm going to kill myself.
But as a Roman matron, she had decided that she no longer wanted to live in this hideous state with these murderous, poisonous people.
You can't.
Oh, yes, I can. My life's my own. It'll be a welcome release. I've no wish to go on living in this place. And you don't have to pretend you'll miss me.
Of course I'll miss you.
And dear Claudius, as usual, was very, very, very upset that his mother had said, "That's what I'm going to do, Claudius. And you, as my son, will have to remove my hand," which apparently showed people that you had died by your own hand when you went to your reward, whatever that might have been.
And remember, cut off my hand for separate burial, for this will be suicide. It'll be just like you to forget it.
And he said, "Oh, I can't bear it." And she said, "Yes, you can, Claudius. You'll survive the flood." So she was quite prophetic. She actually, in the end, knew his strength, knew his mettle.
You may kiss me.
When the series had finished, it was a great success. Not initially, the critics, I think, lukewarm. But then it became a great success. And then they had a luncheon for all the Caesars, Martin Lismore. And Martin Lismore said, "Well, Brian, you know, when we'd had this luncheon, all the Caesars, we've pulled it off. It's a great success. And we've beaten that bloody curse."
It was a great tragedy that Martin was killed very soon after I, Claudius went on the air, because Martin had the wonderful qualities for me as a director, which that he provided the backup and the support and the belief in you and the work that you were doing. And people pointed out to me, because there had been stories of a curse on I, Claudius, that this was one of the things. And this was compounded, of course, when I think only about 3 months further on, Jack Pullman died of a heart attack, age 52. And I remember both Derek and I talking on the phone, listening to each other, looking at each other, saying, not over the phone, but I mean something, saying, well, I don't know, maybe we are the number 3 in line.
And there's another party which I didn't go to. I kept away from it. An extra died at the party, choking on his food. So there was always something about Claudius, about the whole thing.
I looked upon it with the writer like looking through a keyhole at the events that were going on in this family. And part of the thing, of course, it was a huge flashback, insofar that Claudius was writing his memoirs. And I kept cutting back to him to remind us that he's actually an old man reviewing his life and the events in his life and passing some sort of judgment on it.
I, Tiberius, Claudius, Drusus, Nero, Germanicus, this, that, and the other, who was once, and not so long ago, better known to my friends and relatives as Claudius the Idiot, or that fool Claudius, or Claudius the Stammerer, am now about to write this strange history of my life.
With me, the camera is always an actor. It's very, very rarely an observer. And I tend to shoot all my stuff like that, but particularly it paid off in I, Claudius, because I was able for the camera to tell the story as much as an actor would tell a story. It contributed as much, because you can tell so much more in a camera movement or a sudden cut to a close-up than you can do in words.
You used to dance with your cameraman. I mean, you know, you had camera 5, for instance, and he had to crab across, and you had to go with him, and it was a wonderful relationship.
I have to pay credit here to the camera crew, to Jim Atkinson, who was my senior cameraman, who did most of the work that I ever did at the BBC over the many years. and who was brilliant.
There was a wonderful rapport between yourself and the camera, and the changing of the camera, and the cameras were dancing, and so were you.
He and his crew did the most wonderful work on this, and they stayed with me throughout the whole 13 hours. They did every single shot, and he supervised it all. And his influence, his insistence, he was almost a fanatic about the way cameras should be used. The way he used the pedestal cameras was very, very unusual, different from, in fact, I think, all other cameramen. And he actually got quite a lot of criticisms from other cameramen, but I thought he was just brilliant.
Because of the nature of the way in which we rehearsed it and shot it, it was a 10-day turnover, but it was rehearsed in a sense like a play. It wasn't shot like a film.
In a studio, it's all make-believe. A great reality took place. A great concentration like you've got in here now. You can feel it now. I love Television Centre.
Claudius!
It was a wonderful company. We had more fun on that. There wasn't any bickering, no backbiting. Derek was a wonderful leading man. And Herbie was, well, a tremendous director. I mean, he's directed it beautifully.
We had the limitations of the studio and afford the Senate, so we had to build sections of it. And like the Colosseum, for example, they were all watching Christians being put to the lions and all the rest of it, and not only Claudius, but Nero, and they were all watching it. All I just did is the sort of box that they were sitting in, and did the rest with sound effects. I don't think you could get away with that now, but you could get away with it then, and that's all I could afford. That's all I had to do, and I managed to show sections of the Senate, where necessary, and make it look bigger than it actually was. But we did things like that all the time. 20 people to look like 200, and things like that.
Well done, Claudius. Emperor after all. Who would have thought it?
15 extras. That's all. And when you look at it, it looks as if there are about 150 people there. I mean, Herbie really knew what he was doing with his camera and really knew how to shoot it so that it looked as if you were outside. But in fact, you were in the studio with one pillar, and Tim Harvey, our designer, was equally brilliant.
The BBC had a wonderful, wonderful makeup department. So the wigs and the old age makeup it took hours and hours and hours to put on. And it took about 5 hours, I think, to get made up as the old Livia. So it was quite a process, and it made the days very, very long. But it was immensely helpful, of course, because once all that latex is on your face, you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself at all. It was the first time I'd worn these masks, and they were the best that technology could provide at that time. They were very good.
The makeup in I, Claudius, I never came to terms with.
On Claudius, for the first time, we had these sort of prosthetics, these sort of pieces of sort of plastic that sort of stuck all over your face. I never liked them.
I don't think they use it now. It was something they tried out. But pardon me, Gad, I mean, all the girls. I mean, one moment, particularly, it was in episode 4, in which I do my nut.
He'll move when he judges the army ready to move.
He'll move now, and I'll send Posthumus Agrippa with an army to make sure.
I think that wouldn't be wise.
I make the military decisions, not you!
There's no need to lose your temper.
And then I'm blotting things, and the ink's falling all over the desk and things like that. Oh, God! And he's in a terrible mood, and so forth, racing up and down, and this, that, and the other. My makeup was falling off.
The taking off process was as hazardous because we took it off sort of gradually with spirit remover, and because it was all stuck on with spirit gum, which smells, is disgusting stuff. And you have it in every orifice. And of course, during the day, you can only eat you suck soup through a straw or milk through a straw. And constantly, during the filming, the makeup girl was rushing at me because my lips would be cracking or my nose would be coming off, and it all had to be stuck on again, constantly. So and also during the course of the day, your beard starts to grow through it. So if you've put it on at 6 o'clock in the morning and you take it off at 10:30 at night, it's more anchored not only with the glue but with your beard, which is anchoring it. And then eventually we got this idea of lying in a hot bath full of Badidas bath foam with a snorkel, and I would snuggle down under the water, breathe through the snorkel, and very gradually it would lift, and it wouldn't break the skin, and I wouldn't bleed. And I've still got at home, all these years later, a complete, rather squashed Claudius face. Yes.
The makeup supervisor said, "Now listen, Brian, you must not move. You mustn't move, because if you move, so an edict went out that we weren't meant to make them laugh or anything like that." Brian was sitting at a desk, preparing for a scene, with this thing on his face, writing in charcoal, as they did. And I took one of these pieces of charcoal, and I said, "You know, Brian, if you put that between the cheeks of your arse and kept it there for 2,000 years, you'd have a diamond." Pam Meagher was absolutely livid.
What's the matter?
I feel sick.
I mean, there are so many scenes in it that are amazing by everybody. On a personal side, I got the biggest shock for me one day was Herbie coming in and saying, "Well, this is your death day." And everyone was miserable. They didn't want me to die. So it's very sweet of them. Because we did have a lot of fun.
The serious side of Augustus, I mean, epitomized, for example, in his death scene, he was wonderful, because I remember saying to him, "What I want from you is I want to see the light going out of your eyes."
And he said, "I'm going to keep the camera on your face for 4.5 to 5 minutes. We're going to see Rome die. We're going to see the empire die on your face."
I had this long, wonderful speech, and I thought, oh, yes, I know exactly how I'll do this. And Herbert said, "I'm not going to photograph you at all, actually. I'm just going to be on Augustus's dying face."
And she said, "What? I mean, this is the most wonderful speech." And we had quite an argument about this. And I said, no, I will be on the... And she was wonderful. She's a very generous woman.
And Sian wasn't too happy. Well, she's a great gal. She accepted it within 10 minutes because she had 4.5, 5 minutes of speeches.
Are you feeling better? There's a delegation here from Rome.
You didn't see her face. You didn't see her face at all. So he said, I want your eyes open, half open, and I want you dead within 10 seconds. And then I want you for about 4.5 minutes to be dead.
I never heard anything so ridiculous.
I would just hear her voice. I say, "Calm me down, Abby, calm me down, Abby." Because you see things, people dying in films, but you count it. It's 10, 15 seconds, usually it's 7. Oh, they freeze frame if it's a minute. They freeze frame. But not with me. The eyes are watering and everything. The eyes are dead and beginning to decompose.
If you watch the scene, he did it not once, but twice, because there was some technical difficulty.
We did it one take of it, and all the lights in the studio went out.
It was the most extraordinary thing. Everything went dark. We lost all power. When Augustus died, he died silently and all the lights went out. So the more superstitious people in the cast thought that this was part of the curse of Claudius, of course.
And these great cameras above my head and great lighting, and I thought they're going to fall on top of me. And I actually thought I was going to die in that scene. And so the curse came back again, the curse of Claudius, of people dying and being injured. And I felt slightly panicky that I was going to die.
I was really most apologetic and terrified to go down to him on the set and say, "Look, Darren, I'm sorry, we will have to do it again because this, that and the other." He said, "No problem. And we did it again. And he did it as brilliantly the second time as the first time. And I love that, the way he did that.
I think every actor at some point in their career looks for that part that they become associated with. Some actors have more than one. Some actors don't get that one. I was lucky that I got Claudius.
The next part I played after I, Claudius, was an American socialite in a musical by Rodgers and Hart. So that I certainly didn't get from playing Livia. So it didn't make any difference, but it was the most, hugely enjoyable show. And it has been, down the years, the most wonderful visiting card. Anywhere you go in the world, someone will say, weren't you in I, Claudius? Oh, I did love that.
The fact that it was shown internationally meant that work would be offered not only in England, but also abroad. The people in France knew who you were. People in Holland knew who you were.
It was a significant role for me in many ways. It followed very closely to a piece I did called The Naked Civil Servant, which was about Quentin Crisp, and particularly in America, because this was absolutely a huge hit in America.
I was in Israel inaugurating or starting off a cabaret tour that I did in 1998, not so long ago. And I was sitting in the taxi outside my hotel in Tel Aviv, and my interpreter was standing on the pavement, and I was waiting to set off for the theatre. And the driver didn't move off. He was quite a young Israeli. And finally he beckoned to the interpreter who came over, and in Hebrew, apparently, he said, "Is that Augustus's wife in the back?" Not even Livia, Augustus's wife. And they'd just been watching it. So it's a thing that is watched all the time, all over the world, and that's very nice.
I opened a store in Copenhagen, and it was extraordinary. This was just after Claudius had been shown in Denmark, and they had to get me out of the store over the roof as if I was a Beatle. I mean, because of all the people coming to see Claudius.
It did have a major impact on my career, the I, Claudius. In fact, the following day after it had been transmitted, the producer of a series called Poldark rang the producer of I, Claudius and said, "What was this Biggins like?" And he was very complimentary about me. And in fact, I then landed immediately the part of the sex-crazed vicar in Poldark.
I was out of work for 6 months. And my friend Christopher Plummer said, "You're there now, boy. You're in." No, out of work for 6 months, and then we started bashing off again, doing other things.
To look back now, to be here and talking to you about it, it makes you just very proud to have been associated with one of the great programmes of the BBC, just as when I did the Forsyte Saga and the first Churchills. What it meant, what it does mean now to be associated with those truly, truly great programmes. But at the time, it didn't change much about my acting life or what I was asked to do. Maybe it did in subtle ways, but not in ways that I ever realised.
The very first notices were not favourable.
Initially, the critics were a bit pissy about it. They weren't raves by any means.
I remember the Guardian critic, whose name I remember but I won't quote now, starting his criticism by saying there ought to be a society for the prevention of cruelty to actors.
We knew it was good. We knew that we were in something very, very classy. But we were a little bit chary of how it was going to go with the audience.
My then husband, Peter O'Toole, said, "Oh, don't worry about this." He said he had asked somebody to research the notices for the novel when that came out, and they were almost identical with the notices for the series when it came out. You know, people were shocked that people in togas were talking slang, and they found it rather odd. And then within a few weeks, everyone had sort of turned around and changed their minds and started giving it much better notices.
It was not until we were about halfway through the series I got an inkling that perhaps this was bigger than most other things, and it was just a sort of gut feeling.
It was just about halfway through the series when we were starting to film the last episode that they turned around and said, we've made a terrible mistake. This is actually great television and brilliantly written and wonderfully directed and marvellous acting. So everybody was on a big, big high.
And I just think, not because I'm in it, I think it's the best series ever I've ever seen. I can be objective. I'm too bloody old, man, too long in the tooth to have that kind of vanity. I think the whole standard by everybody in the teamwork, it is on its own.
I mean, I'm quite sure that they could show it again now. I'm sure that there's a generation that would be... Because I think it's timeless. It's not something which is going to date that badly.
The critics initially hadn't greeted it with open arms, but right from the beginning, the public seemed to.
If you like EastEnders, if you like Coronation Street, or any of those, then I, Claudius, you can relate I, Claudius to that.
It was like a sort of Roman Coronation Street. I mean, I think that's where it scored, because it was everyday life in a way, and portrayed as such, and yet most appalling things happened, like murders and everything, which of course wouldn't happen in an everyday soap of today, but in those days it did. And I think that's where the public really liked it. I think that's where the public took it into its heart and relished it.
If I say I did I, Claudius, all these years later, people still react to it, still remember it, still say, oh, I see. And I've done a lot of work since then. I mean, some of it quite well received, but that's the one that everybody remembers.
The adaptation by Pullman is outstanding. Great work. Great scholarship. Great work by Erskine. Great direction. Great production. Staff, makeup, wardrobe, outstanding cast that worked as a team. And I think it's as near perfection as you can get. I think we all got it together right. And I think that God looks down on a great team and smiles with satisfaction and says, that is it, that's enough.